Before sunrise, Elias crossed the frozen courtyard carrying a wooden bowl filled to the rim. Snow pressed against the monastery walls, and every breath left a pale cloud in front of him. At the far end of the courtyard stood an old tree, black against the morning sky, its branches stiff and empty. Elias knelt beside it, broke the thin layer of ice around its roots, and poured the water slowly into the frozen ground. Behind him, an axe struck wood. Brother Varin rested the blade against his shoulder. "They are cutting it down this afternoon." Elias kept his eyes on the dark soil. "You are watering firewood," Varin said. 8 months earlier, Elias had arrived at the mountain monastery with one bag, a pair of worn boots, and the belief that discipline could repair whatever weakness existed inside him. He had left his father's workshop after abandoning 3 apprenticeships in 5 years. Each time work became slow or uncertain, he found a reason to walk away. At the monastery, no one asked him to explain. Abbot Cassian gave him 3 morning duties. Sweep the eastern path. Refill the stone basin for the birds. Water the old tree beside the courtyard wall. The first 2 duties made sense. The third did not. The tree had no leaves. A lightning scar split its trunk from the lowest branch to the roots. When Elias pressed his palm against the bark, it felt colder than the surrounding stone. Varin saw him studying it. "That tree died before you arrived," he said. Elias looked toward the abbot, who was crossing the courtyard without turning his head. "Then why assign it to me?" Varin shrugged. "Perhaps he wanted to see how long it would take you to notice." Elias watered it anyway. At first, he believed the assignment concealed a purpose. Perhaps there was life deep beneath the bark. Perhaps Cassian understood the tree better than anyone else. Elias imagined the morning when a small green shoot would appear and prove that his obedience had not been foolish. Every day, after pouring the water, he inspected the branches. Winter loosened its grip on the mountain. Snow retreated from the stones. Grass appeared along the paths, and pale blossoms opened in the lower garden. The old tree remained bare. The other monks noticed Elias's routine. Some watched without comment. Varin began calling the tree Elias's most patient student. The joke followed him into the dining hall. "Has it learned to grow yet?" one novice asked. Elias smiled with the others, but the next morning he woke earlier. He crossed the courtyard while the windows were still dark, hoping to finish before anyone saw him. One dawn, he carried a small knife with him. After watering the roots, he scraped away a narrow strip of bark. He expected greenwood beneath it. The wood was dry and grey. He covered the mark with his hand when footsteps approached. That evening, Elias sat across from Abbot Cassian during the meal. The abbot ate slowly, his attention resting on nothing in particular. "Are all duties meant to produce something?" Elias asked. Cassian set down his spoon. "Every duty reveals the person performing it." Elias waited for more, but Cassian returned to his meal. By early summer, the mountain spring had weakened. The stream that usually filled the monastery's storage jars became a thin line of water sliding over stone. Varin measured each jar and marked the daily level with charcoal. The monks washed with less. The garden received only enough to keep the youngest plants alive. Each man was given 1 cup of drinking water for the hours between breakfast and evening prayer. Elias began saving part of his cup. He told himself it was sacrifice. He told himself the tree might still be alive somewhere below the soil. Yet after pouring the water, he searched the branches with greater urgency than before. One morning, Varin caught him. "You used your ration." "It was mine." "It was given to keep you working." "I can work without it." Varin looked at the tree. "That is not discipline. That is pride wearing a robe." Elias tightened his grip around the bowl. "If I stop now, every morning before this becomes meaningless." Varin's expression changed, but he said nothing. The sentence stayed with Elias long after the courtyard emptied. That afternoon, he saw 2 sparrows land near the tree. They hopped around the shallow hollow he had shaped around the roots and drank from the damp earth. For a moment, Elias watched them with a softer expression. Then he raised his eyes to the branches. Still nothing. Days passed without rain. Leaves curled on the monastery's fruit trees. Dust gathered on the window sills. A young pear sapling in the lower garden began to lean toward the ground. Varin found Elias beside the old tree again. He took the wooden bowl from Elias's hands. A small amount of water remained inside it. Without a word, Varin carried the bowl to the lower garden and poured it around the pear sapling. Several monks watched from the path. Varin turned toward Elias. Which matters more? What can still be saved, or your need to be proven faithful? Elias looked at the living sapling, its thin leaves trembling in the heat. He had no answer. That night, he sat beneath the dead tree until the courtyard lamps went out. His fingers found the strip of bark he had cut months earlier. The wound had not closed. Beneath it, the wood remained pale and lifeless. He understood then that he had not been giving water freely. Each bowl had carried a demand. Grow, and prove I was right. Grow, and make the ridicule worth enduring. Grow, and show that I am not the man who abandons difficult things. He had treated his effort like a debt the tree was required to repay. Before dawn, Elias placed the empty bowl beside the roots and walked away. He did not look back. The next morning, he swept the eastern path and refilled the stone basin. When he reached the courtyard, he passed the old tree without stopping. Near midday, he saw sparrows pecking at the dry hollow around its roots. They searched the dust for moisture, then flew toward the mountain. Elias stood beneath the archway with his drinking cup in his hand. He returned to the tree. He did not pour the water against the trunk. Instead, he filled the shallow hollow where the birds had gathered. He did not inspect the branches or touch the bark. He left before anything came to drink. From then on, Elias watered the hollow only when water remained after his duties and his own needs were met. On some mornings, the bowl was half full. On others, it was empty. He no longer hid from the monks. He no longer counted the days. Summer ended. Rain returned to the mountain, and the storage jars slowly filled. The pear sapling recovered. The old tree did not. Autumn wind stripped leaves from every tree in the garden, making the dead one briefly indistinguishable from the living. Then winter came, and a storm broke one of its largest branches. It crashed into the courtyard during the night, scattering frozen twigs across the stones. Abbot Cassian examined the split trunk the next morning. It must come down, he said. He assigned Elias and Varin to remove it. Varin waited for Elias to object. Months earlier, Elias might have argued for one more season. He might have pointed to the rain, the roots, or the possibility of hidden life. Instead, he collected 2 axes and cleared the courtyard. The first strike entered the trunk with a hollow sound. Elias flinched. Then he raised his own axe. They worked slowly, cutting from opposite sides. When the trunk began to lean, Elias wrapped a rope around it and guided its fall away from the wall. The tree landed across the snow with a heavy crack. He stood over it, breathing hard. There were no green shoots beneath the bark. No living core. The tree had been dead from the beginning. Varin began splitting the trunk into sections for firewood. On the third strike, the wood broke open, and a bundle of dried grass fell onto the snow. Then another. Small feathers clung to the hollow interior. Several abandoned nests had been built inside the trunk, hidden from view. The tree had sheltered them through spring and summer. The water pooled around its roots had remained after the birds could find little elsewhere. Varin looked at Elias, waiting for satisfaction. Elias knelt and lifted one of the nests before it could be crushed beneath a log. He placed it carefully near the wall. Abbot Cassian approached as the last section of trunk was carried away. Was the work worthwhile? He asked. Elias looked at the empty space where the tree had stood. The work was mine, he said. What came from it was not. Cassian picked up the wooden bowl and placed it in Elias's hands. By spring, the courtyard had changed. Rain gathered in the shallow hollow left by the roots. Moss grew along its edges. A new novice watered a struggling sapling in the lower garden. After emptying the bowl, the young man bent close to inspect every leaf. Elias watched from the path. He did not promise that the sapling would survive. He did not tell the novice to care less. He stepped forward, straightened the crooked basin around the plant, and continued sweeping. Near the old wall, a sparrow landed beside the empty root hollow. It lowered its head and drank from the rainwater. Elias passed without looking back. The tree was gone. The care remained.